The text message made my hand go numb. I had to read it 3 times before the words registered. Sorry, can't make it to your award ceremony tonight. Something came up. 8 hours before the biggest night of my career. 8 hours before I was supposed to walk across that stage as the youngest architect ever nominated for the Innovation Award. I stood in my apartment, halfway dressed in the midnight blue gown I'd spent 2 months' rent on, staring at my phone. Porter had promised to accompany me as my mentor. He'd insisted on it. An achievement like this deserves proper recognition, he'd said just last week, clapping me on the shoulder. I'll be there to introduce you to everyone who matters. My fingers hovered over the screen, typing and deleting responses. What was I supposed to say? That it was fine? That 3 years of working 16-hour days, of pouring my soul into revolutionary designs while fighting to be taken seriously, culminating in this nomination, meant so little he could bail with a text? Before I could respond, another message lit up my screen, not from Porter, but from Tess in accounting, a group photo from what looked like a party. There was Porter, grinning widely, arm thrown around Darian's shoulders, my colleague, the man who'd spent every day since I joined the firm trying to undermine me. In the background hung a banner, "Congratulations on your promotion." My stomach hollowed out. The glass of celebration wine I'd been nursing slipped from my fingers, splashing red across the cream carpet. I barely noticed. Darian got promoted, and Porter, my mentor, the man who was supposed to champion my career, chose his party over my award ceremony. I zoomed in on the picture, noting the expensive wine bottles, the catered food, the 20-some colleagues all gathered in Darian's sleek new apartment, the apartment he'd spent months talking about, scheduling the housewarming deliberately for tonight. Such a shame it conflicts with your little award thing, he'd said last week, voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'm sure some people will still come to yours. I'd thought it was just Darian being Darian. I hadn't imagined Porter would choose sides so blatantly. My phone pinged again. A private message from Tess. I'm so sorry, Nira. I thought you knew. Darian's taking over the hospital expansion project. Your project. The room tilted sideways. The hospital expansion was my design, my vision, the project that had earned me the award nomination. I'd created an entirely new approach to healing spaces, gardens that grew through the building itself, light channels that shifted with patients' recovery cycles, structural elements that breathed with the environment. I sank onto my bed, still half-dressed, as another message came through. A photo from Darian's sleek glass dining table. Spread across it were renderings, my designs, with tiny alterations. I called Porter. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. The clock ticked forward. The ceremony started in 2 hours. I could stay home, let them win, or I could go alone and hold my head high. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of a car at the convention center, my dress fully zipped, my eyes clear. If I had to accept this award alone, so be it. The ceremony glittered with industry elites. I found my assigned seat, toward the front where nominees sat. People nodded politely, but few stopped to chat. Without Porter to introduce me, I was just another young face in a room of established powers. The Innovation Award celebrates architectural vision that transforms how we experience space, the presenter announced. I straightened in my seat. This was my category, my moment, for revolutionary healthcare design concepts that reimagine healing environments. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. The award goes to Anton Meyer of Summit Design. The room disappeared into a tunnel of noise. Anton Meyer? Who was Anton Meyer? A tall man in his 50s strode confidently to the stage. Behind him, projected on the massive screen, were designs. Designs with garden elements growing through structural walls. Designs with light channels that shifted throughout recovery spaces. My designs. As Anton began his acceptance speech, he gestured to the audience. I'd like to thank my exceptional consultant who provided invaluable guidance on the core concepts. The spotlight swung to illuminate someone standing and waving in acknowledgement. Darian. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Somehow, my revolutionary designs had found their way to another firm, and Darian knew exactly how they'd gotten there. Wait, Before I continue this shocking story, if you're feeling that twist in your gut right now, you know this is just getting started. Hit that like button if you've ever been betrayed, subscribe to catch the fallout, and drop a comment about what you think Nira should do next. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when this architect decides to draft her own revenge. My name is Nira Kwan, and until that night, I'd believed that exceptional work would always speak for itself. I'd grown up watching my father craft furniture in his workshop, turning raw materials into functional art. He'd taught me that creation was sacred, that building something from nothing was the closest humans came to magic. Architecture was my way of making magic on a grand scale. At 32, I'd already developed a reputation for unconventional approaches, while other architects at our firm created efficient but predictable structures. I designed buildings that conversed with their environments, that changed with the seasons, and responded to the people inside them. I joined Porter's firm fresh out of graduate school. Not the most prestigious offer I'd received, but Porter had promised creative freedom. I recognize something special in your work, he'd said during my interview. Something that can't be taught. For the first year, he'd been true to his word. He assigned me to smaller projects but gave me room to experiment. Clients responded enthusiastically to my designs, and slowly, I earned larger commissions. Then, Darian arrived. He transferred from a competitor firm with an impressive portfolio and immediately set his sights on establishing dominance. 10 years older than me with conventional good looks and an education from all the right schools, Darian navigated office politics with practiced ease. Interesting concept, he'd say during my presentations, voice smooth as silk. Though perhaps too conceptual for actual construction, clients ultimately want reliability, not experiments. Yet clients kept choosing my experiments. Each success seemed to fuel his resentment. He began scheduling client meetings when I couldn't attend. Subtle comments about my youth and inexperience peppered conversations with partners. Work I'd submitted for review would return with fundamental changes. Darian was concerned about structural integrity, Porter would explain. He's just looking out for the firm. I adapted, worked harder, documented everything. And Porter, caught between his recognition of my talent and Darian's relentless campaigning, tried to appease both of us. The turning point came with the children's hospital redesign. The original building was 50 years old, a concrete block with narrow windows and cramped rooms. The board wanted something revolutionary that would transform the healing experience. I threw myself into research, speaking with doctors, patients, and families. I studied how nature affects recovery rates, how light influences mood, how spatial flow impacts stress levels. For 6 months, I worked weekends and nights, developing a design unlike anything in modern healthcare. My proposal featured gardens that grew not just around but through the building, with patient rooms opening onto green spaces at every floor. Light channels followed the sun's path, directing natural illumination through recovery areas based on circadian rhythms. The structural elements themselves curved and expanded, creating spaces that felt like sheltering trees rather than confining rooms. When I presented to the board, the room fell silent. Then the questions began, thoughtful, engaged questions about implementation and maintenance. By the end, they were leaning forward in their seats. "This isn't just a building," the hospital director said. "This is a completely new understanding of healing spaces." I didn't know then that Darian had been developing his own hospital proposal for months. When both our projects went before the final review committee, mine was selected unanimously. That evening, Porter took me to dinner. "This deserves industry recognition," he said. "I'm nominating you for the Innovation Award. No one has approached healthcare design this way before." 2 months later came the nomination announcement, the youngest architect ever considered. Porter promised to be by my side at the ceremony, to introduce me to the industry elite. "This is just the beginning," he assured me. What I didn't know was that Darian had already begun his campaign against me. Private lunches with Porter, where he questioned whether my designs could scale for larger projects. Suggestions that I lacked the experience for serious client management. Hints that I would eventually leave for a competitor, taking clients with me. And somehow, during this campaign, my designs for the hospital began appearing elsewhere. First, in small elements in other firms' work, then in more substantial ways, until finally, they appeared almost entirely intact in Anton Meyer's award-winning project. The morning after the ceremony, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The hallways were silent except for the quiet shuffling of the cleaning crew. A gray-haired woman was emptying trash bins near Porter's office. "Quite a gathering last night," she said, noticing me. "Had to clean up before everyone arrives. Your boss left papers everywhere. Not very careful with important documents, is he?" I thanked her absently and continued to my desk, turning on my computer to find an email from the awards committee. "We regret to inform you that your nomination was withdrawn by your sponsoring mentor 3 days prior to the ceremony." Porter had pulled my nomination, not just failed to attend, actively withdrawn it. But why? The answer began revealing itself over the following weeks. My projects were reassigned one by one. Porter avoided direct conversation during meetings. Darian received the promotion to Senior Design Director, taking over client relationships I had built over 3 years. "Your work is too specialized," Porter finally told me during a brief, uncomfortable meeting. "The firm is moving in a different direction, toward more commercially viable designs." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while everything inside me burned. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. The same cleaning woman appeared in the doorway of my office. "Working late?" she asked, emptying my trash. "Just finishing some things," I replied. Then, carefully, "I've been meaning to ask, when you cleaned Porter's office after the party, did you happen to see any designs for the Children's Hospital project? My project?" Her hand paused on the trash bin. "The ones with the garden patterns growing through the building?" "Yes. I saw copies on his desk marked for someone at another firm. Seemed strange since those looked just like your drawings from the recycling bin." She placed something on my desk, a crumpled sticky note with a phone number and the name Anton Meyer. "People don't notice cleaning staff," she said quietly. "They talk like we're invisible. They leave things out like we can't read." Her eyes met mine, sharp and clear. Some of us read very well indeed. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the entire board of directors. Porter looked confused when he saw me waiting in the conference room. "I thought we settled your transition," he said, straightening his tie. "We did," I replied, "but I wanted to personally introduce my replacement." The door opened. The board members filed in, followed by the CEO of our largest client, and behind them, the cleaning woman, now dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, her gray hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Porter's face drained of color. "This is Imogen Reed," I said calmly, "former head of the State Architectural Licensing Board. She's been working undercover, investigating ethics violations in major firms for the past 6 months." The room fell completely silent. "She's also my mother's oldest friend," I added, "and she noticed some interesting things while emptying your trash, Porter." "What is this?" Porter stammered, looking between me and Imogen. "This is accountability," Imogen replied, placing a small drive on the conference table. While cleaning, I discovered communications detailing how Ms. Kwan's designs were sent to competitors with minor modifications, how her award nomination was withdrawn after she refused certain advances, how Mr. Darian's promotion came with promises to board members about future contracts with their private interests. Porter attempted to speak, but the client's CEO raised his hand. When Nira contacted me with her concerns, I asked Imogen to look into this firm's practices. The CEO said, "What she found goes beyond one stolen design. It appears to be systematic exploitation of junior designers, particularly women." The board chairman cleared his throat. "These are serious allegations." "With serious evidence," Imogen replied, gesturing toward the drive, "including recordings from the party where certain individuals were quite forthcoming about their methods after a few drinks." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Porter's eyes darted between the board members, searching for allies, finding none. "These recordings were obtained illegally," Darian said, recovering faster than Porter. "A cleaning person eavesdropping? That would never hold up." "I wasn't just a cleaning person," Imogen interrupted. "I was an investigator with full authorization from the State Licensing Board, following up on multiple ethics complaints against this firm. My employment here was completely legal, as was my collection of evidence that was in plain sight. She turned to the board, including emails sent to Anton Meyer with Ms. Kwan's original designs, communications about withdrawing her award nomination, and discussions of how to push her out without triggering a discrimination lawsuit. The client's CEO leaned forward. My company invested millions in what we believed was a groundbreaking hospital design. We chose this firm specifically because of Nira's presentation. If her work was then stolen and sold elsewhere while we were left with a watered-down version. That's absurd, Porter finally managed. Nira's a talented young designer, but she's clearly spinning a narrative to explain her career setbacks. Designs evolve, ideas overlap. Nothing was stolen. I removed my tablet from my bag and placed it on the table. 6 months ago, I began watermarking all my digital files with an invisible signature. I also embedded unique elements in each design iteration, small details that serve no functional purpose except to identify my work. I opened a file showing side-by-side comparisons of my hospital designs and Anton Meyer's award-winning project. I highlighted one section after another: identical waterways, identical light channels, even identical bench placements in garden areas. Then I zoomed in on tiny details: a pattern of tiles that spelled my niece's name in code, a series of curves that matched my father's furniture signature. These aren't coincidences or parallel evolution, I said. These are my designs stolen and sold. This is preposterous, Darian snapped. Porter, are you going to let her? The board chairman held up his hand. Mr. Porter, Mr. Darian, I suggest you both remain silent until legal counsel arrives. Ms. Reed, is there more? Imogen nodded. Extensive documentation of sexual harassment against female employees, kickback arrangements with contractors, and billing irregularities that would interest the IRS. But most relevant to today's discussion, she produced a flash drive, our communications between Mr. Porter, Mr. Darian, and Anton Meyer regarding the sale of Ms. Kwan's designs. The CEO stood abruptly. I've heard enough. Our company will be conducting a full audit of all work this firm has done for us. In the meantime, I'm implementing a hold on all current projects. Porter paled further. That's a $40 million account. You can't just, I can and I am. The CEO turned to me. Ms. Kwan, I'd appreciate a meeting with you tomorrow regarding your future plans. As the meeting disbanded into chaos, security personnel arrived to escort Porter and Darian to clear their offices. I watched them leave, Darian's face twisted with rage, Porter's slack with shock. Imogen touched my arm. Ready for phase 2? I nodded, my heart racing with a mixture of vindication and uncertainty. The foundation was laid, but the real architecture of justice was just beginning. The story of what happened at the firm spread through the industry within days. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues, competitors, journalists. I agreed to just one interview with the Architecture Innovation Journal, the same publication that had featured Anton Meyer's stolen design on its cover. The reporter Zane met me at a cafe near the riverfront, his recorder placed carefully between us. Let's start with the obvious question, he said after pleasantries. Why go public? You could have sued quietly, reached a settlement. I sipped my tea, considering, because it wasn't just about me. In preparing my case, we found at least 7 other designers, mostly women, mostly young, whose work had been appropriated in similar ways. Some never even knew. And the cleaning staff disguise? That seems extreme. That was Imogen's idea, I admitted. She's been investigating ethics violations in architecture firms for years. When I approached her with my suspicions, she suggested using her ongoing undercover operation to gather evidence. Convenient that she happened to be your mother's friend. I smiled thinly. Not convenient, causal. My mother met Imogen 20 years ago when she experienced similar theft of her engineering patents. That's why I noticed the pattern so quickly. I'd grown up hearing about it. The article ran the following week, alongside an industry-wide survey revealing that 62% of junior designers had experienced some form of intellectual property theft. The state board announced formal investigations into 3 major firms, including Porter's. But victories rarely come without casualties. We appreciate your interest. said the hiring manager at the fourth firm I'd interviewed with. Your work is impressive, but given the current situation, we're concerned about potential complications. Translation: no one wanted to hire the whistleblower. 8 interviews, 8 rejections, each more polite than the last. But the message was clear. I had made powerful enemies. Though Porter and Darian were disgraced, their network remained intact. Whispers circulated that I was difficult, litigious, not a team player. My savings dwindled. The rent on my apartment, once a point of pride, became a source of anxiety. I began selling furniture, canceling subscriptions, calculating how many months I could survive without income. The hospital CEO had offered me a direct contract to complete my original design, but legal complications with the firm delayed the project indefinitely. Other potential clients expressed interest but hesitated to commit while litigation was ongoing. 6 months after the board meeting, I sat in my half-empty apartment, scrolling through job listings outside architecture. Maybe I could teach, or switch to interior design, or leave the field entirely. My phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Nira Kwan? A woman's voice, crisp and direct. Yes, speaking. This is June Reeves, Executive Director of the Architectural Justice Project. We're a new nonprofit addressing intellectual property theft and discrimination in design fields. Your case has been of particular interest to us. We'd like to offer you a position as our first creative director. I sat up straighter. I'm not familiar with your organization. We just received our funding. A group of industry leaders concerned about ethics violations provided our initial endowment. We need someone who understands the problem firsthand and has the courage to address it publicly. The position includes leading design, education programs, and consulting on reform initiatives. It sounded too perfect. After months of closed doors, suddenly a window? May I ask who recommended me? A slight pause. Several people, including Imogen Reed. But our primary advocate was Anton Meyer. My breath caught. Anton Meyer? The man who stole my designs? The man who was deceived into using your designs, she corrected. When the truth came out, he was horrified. He's returned the award and has been cooperating fully with investigators. He'd like to meet with you, actually, to apologize in person. My mind raced. Could this be legitimate, or an elaborate trap set by Porter and Darian to discredit me further? I agreed to meet both June and Anton the following day at the Architectural Justice Project's temporary office, a converted warehouse in the Arts District. I arrived early, circling the block twice before entering, half expecting to find Porter waiting inside. Instead, I found a bustling workspace. Designers and lawyers huddled around conference tables. Wall displays featured side-by-side comparisons of stolen designs and originals, including mine. June greeted me warmly. Thank you for coming. Anton is waiting in the conference room. I followed her, heart pounding. Anton Meyer stood as I entered. Tall, distinguished, his expression grave. Ms. Kwan, he said, extending his hand. I owe you an enormous apology. I shook his hand cautiously. You claimed my work as your own. I did, he acknowledged, gesturing for me to sit. Though not knowingly, Porter approached me claiming to represent your firm's collaborative output. He presented your designs as a joint project that the firm was willing to share with me as part of a larger partnership arrangement. And you believed that? That a firm would just give away revolutionary designs? Anton sighed heavily. In retrospect, it was suspiciously generous. But Porter and I had collaborated legitimately in the past. And the fee I paid, which I now know went entirely to him and Darian, seemed substantial. He slid a folder across the table. These are the transfer records. I've provided everything to the investigators. I opened the folder. Bank statements showed payments totaling over $500,000. They sold my work for $500,000? I whispered. And I built my reputation on it, Anton said grimly, which is why I'm committed to making this right, not just for you, but for everyone this has happened to. June leaned forward. The Architectural Justice Project isn't just about addressing past wrongs. It's about creating new systems to prevent future theft. We need someone with both design brilliance and ethical clarity to help lead that effort. I looked between them, my suspicion gradually giving way to cautious hope. What exactly would this role entail? Creating educational programs for design schools about intellectual property rights, consulting on technology to protect digital designs, and, June smiled, completing your hospital project as originally envisioned. The CEO has transferred the contract to us, and we'd like you to lead it, with full credit and creative control. It felt like standing on a precipice. After months of closed doors, here was not just an opening but an entirely new path. Yet something nagged at me. This sounds incredible, I said carefully. But I have to ask, why me? Surely there are more experienced architects who could lead this. Anton and June exchanged glances. Because you didn't just fight back, June said. You fought back in a way that exposed the entire system, not just your personal grievance. That's the perspective we need. I accepted the position the next day. Within weeks, the Architectural Justice Project became my new home. We established protocols for design protection, created resources for vulnerable young architects, and began the process of rebuilding my hospital design with a team of supportive colleagues. My career, which I'd thought destroyed, took on new dimension. I spoke at conferences, consulted with firms on ethical practices, and watched as the industry slowly began to change. But something still felt unfinished. Porter and Darian had been removed from the firm, their professional reputations damaged but not destroyed. The legal process dragged on, with their expensive attorneys filing motion after motion to delay proceedings. They had lost their positions but not their freedom, their wealth, or ultimately their connections. 6 months into my new role, I received a call from Imogen. Porter's starting a new firm, she said without preamble. Smaller, but backed by some loyal clients. Darian's joining him. My stomach tightened. How? After everything that came out? Money talks, and memories are short in this industry. They're claiming they've been vindicated because the criminal charges were reduced to civil penalties. I gripped the phone tighter. So they steal my designs, steal my award, nearly destroy my career, and get to start over? Unless someone stops them. Imogen said quietly. The official investigation is winding down, but I've continued gathering information. There's more, Nira. Much more than we initially found. What kind of information? The kind that doesn't just end careers. The kind that ends freedom. She paused. I need your help to complete the picture. Are you willing to take this further? I thought of all the nights I'd spent rebuilding my life, of the other designers whose work had been stolen, of how easily Porter and Darian might do this again to someone else. What do you need me to do? Imogen's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would give Porter and Darian exactly what they wanted, a chance to steal from me again. Using my position at the Architectural Justice Project, I announced a revolutionary new security protocol for design protection, ADE, a digital watermarking system that could track any unauthorized use of architectural plans. The architecture blogs picked up the story immediately. Within days, I received an email from Porter. Congratulations on your new venture. Perhaps we could discuss potential collaboration? No hard feelings about past misunderstandings. No hard feelings. As if he hadn't systematically stolen my work, sabotaged my career, and treated me as disposable. I agreed to meet at his new office, a modest space compared to his former domain, but still featuring the sleek, expensive furniture he preferred. Darian was there too, his smile tight and artificial. Nira, Porter greeted me expansively. You're looking well. This new project of yours sounds fascinating. I placed my tablet on the table, watching their eyes track it hungrily. It's revolutionary. A completely secure way to protect intellectual property. Once implemented industry-wide, design theft would become impossible. Ambitious, Darian commented. But is it market-ready? These systems often have vulnerabilities. See for yourself, I said, opening a file showing a new museum design. A structure of interlocking curves and suspended gardens that took my hospital concept even further. This is protected by our beta system. Even if someone copied these files, the watermarks would reveal the source. Porter leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Impressive, very impressive. Would you consider an investment partner? Your technology paired with our client connections could be quite lucrative. I might, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I'll need to discuss it with my team, but I could leave this demonstration file with you to review the technical specifications. That would be helpful, Darian said quickly. Too quickly. I stood to leave. Just don't share it outside your office, please. The security features are still proprietary. Of course not, Porter assured me. We understand the value of intellectual property better than most. As I walked out, I felt their eyes on my back. I had laid the bait. Now we would wait for them to take it. 1 week later, I received an urgent call from June. It happened, she said. Just as you predicted. Someone accessed your demonstration file and tried to remove the watermarks. They then sent modified versions to 3 different developers. My heart raced. Were you able to trace it? Directly to Porter's IP address. The system captured everything. The download, the attempted modifications, the transmission to other parties, and because they agreed in writing not to share the file, it constitutes both copyright infringement and breach of contract. What about the other component? June's voice lowered. Imogen's team found it. The financial records were hidden behind shell companies, but the trail is clear. Porter and Darian weren't just stealing designs. They were laundering money for several development projects. When they sold your hospital design to Anton, the payments went through the same channels they'd been using for years. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. So, it's over? Almost, June said. But there's one more piece to put in place. Are you ready? I thought of all the nights I'd lain awake, replaying the humiliation of that award ceremony, of standing alone while my designs were celebrated under someone else's name, of watching Porter and Darian nearly escape consequences. I'm ready. 3 days later, Porter and Darian were arrested, not just for intellectual property theft, but for financial crimes that spanned a decade. The industry publications that had once celebrated Anton's stolen design now featured Porter's and Darian's mugshots. But even as I watched the news reports, something felt incomplete. They would face justice, yes. But what about my moment? The recognition that had been stolen from me? That evening, I received an invitation that made my hands shake. The Innovation Awards Committee was holding a special ceremony. A ceremony to publicly rescind Anton's award and present it to its rightful recipient. And they wanted me to attend. I stood in my apartment, holding the invitation, remembering the last time I'd prepared for this ceremony, how I'd stood in the same spot, reading Porter's cancellation text, how I'd gone alone, only to watch my stolen work celebrated. This time would be different. This time, justice would have its day. But as I began planning what to wear, what to say, a notification appeared on my phone, breaking news from the architecture world. Porter and Darian had been released on bail, and their attorney had made a statement. My clients categorically deny all charges and look forward to being fully exonerated. We have evidence that Ms. Kwan deliberately entrapped them as part of a vindictive campaign to destroy their reputations. We will be filing countercharges immediately. My stomach dropped. Could they actually escape again? Turn this around and make me the villain? As I stared at the screen in disbelief, my phone rang. Imogen, don't panic, she said immediately. This is exactly what we expected. It's their last desperate move. But what if it works? What if people believe them? They won't, Imogen said with absolute certainty. Because tomorrow at the award ceremony, we're revealing the final piece of evidence. The piece that will make sure they never work in this industry, or any industry, again. What evidence? I thought we'd found everything. Not everything, Imogen said. There's one last revelation, and it changes everything. The award ceremony was held at the same venue as the original, the Grand Pavilion, with its soaring glass ceiling and dramatic lighting. But this time, as I entered, people noticed. Conversations paused, heads turned. There she is, someone whispered loudly enough for me to hear. The architect who brought down Porter and Darian. I wore a structured emerald dress, not the midnight blue gown from before. This wasn't a continuation of that night. It was a reclamation, a beginning rather than an ending. Anton Meyer approached immediately, extending his hand. Ms. Kwan, thank you for coming. I know this can't erase what happened, but I hope it helps set things right. The ceremony itself was smaller than the original awards, focused solely on the Innovation Award correction. Industry leaders filled the first rows, with press lining the back wall. As I took my seat in the front row, I noticed a reserved section cordoned off with velvet ropes. The placard read simply, "Special guests." The lights dimmed. The committee chairperson took the stage. "We gather tonight to correct a grievous error," she began. "The Innovation Award celebrates not just creativity, but integrity and architectural vision. Last year, that integrity was compromised." She detailed the investigation findings, how my designs had been stolen, how the nomination had been withdrawn under false pretenses, how the award had gone to work that was fundamentally mine. "But tonight is about more than correcting a single mistake," she continued. "It's about addressing a pattern of behavior that has damaged our profession and hurt countless talented architects." The chairperson gestured to the side entrance, where Imogen stood with a small group of people I didn't recognize, 3 women and 2 men, ranging in age from mid-20s to early 50s. "These are just a few of the architects whose work was appropriated by Porter and Darien over the past 15 years, the chairperson explained. "Their stories mirror Ms. Kwan's in disturbing ways. Designs stolen, credit reassigned, careers derailed." My breath caught. I knew there had been others, but seeing them, these strangers united by the same betrayal I'd experienced, made it viscerally real. "But the story doesn't end with theft," the chairperson continued, her voice hardening. "When these architects raised concerns, they were systematically silenced through intimidation, harassment, and blacklisting." The screens around the hall lit up with email exchanges, text messages, internal memos, all documenting a coordinated campaign to discredit anyone who questioned Porter's or Darien's actions. What many of you don't know is that 2 days ago, Porter and Darien attempted to continue this pattern with Ms. Kwan. After being released on bail, they sent her this. The central screen displayed a message that made my stomach clench. "Drop the charges or we release the personal photographs. You know the ones. Your choice if you want to be known for your architecture or your indiscretions." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The chairperson raised her hand for silence. There were no photographs. There were no indiscretions. This was a fabrication designed to frighten Miss Kwan into silence, the same tactic they've used against others. But this time, they made a critical mistake. The door at the back of the hall opened. Security personnel entered, escorting 2 figures in handcuffs. Porter and Darien, ashen-faced and disheveled, were led to the reserved section. "Mr. Porter and Mr. Darien are here tonight by court order," the chairperson explained. The threatening message they sent violated the terms of their bail. But more importantly, it was sent through a messaging system developed by the Architectural Justice Project, ISEM, a system designed to capture evidence of exactly this kind of intimidation. I turned to see Porter staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. Darien's eyes darted around the room, as if still searching for escape. The evidence gathered through this system revealed something even more disturbing than we initially understood, the chairperson continued. The full scope of their activities extended beyond design theft to systematic blackmail, fraudulent billing practices, and even sabotage of competing projects that threatened structural integrity. The screens displayed construction site photographs, annotated with safety violations that had been deliberately concealed, potential catastrophes waiting to happen. "Lives were put at risk," the chairperson said gravely, "and for that reason, the charges have been escalated from civil to criminal, with no possibility of further bail." The audience sat in stunned silence. These weren't just career crimes. They were actions that could have resulted in physical harm, or worse. But tonight isn't about dwelling on corruption, the chairperson said, her tone softening. It's about recognizing innovation that was nearly lost, about restoring credit where it belongs. She turned toward me. "Nira Kwan, would you please join me on stage?" My legs felt unsteady as I rose and walked the few steps to the podium. The lights seemed brighter than before, the audience more attentive. The Innovation Award celebrates architectural vision that transforms how we experience space, the chairperson said, echoing the words from the original ceremony. For revolutionary healthcare design concepts that reimagine healing environments, the award rightfully belongs to Nira Kwan. She placed the award in my hands, a crystal sculpture representing interlocking forms rising toward the sky. The weight of it felt simultaneously substantial and lighter than I'd imagined. As I stepped to the microphone, I found myself looking not at Porter and Darian, but at the other architects who had been victimized, the ones who hadn't received this moment of vindication. This award recognizes a design that reimagines healing spaces, I began. But today, I'm thinking about another kind of healing, the kind that happens when truth replaces deception, when systems that protect wrongdoers are dismantled, when those who were silenced find their voices again. I gestured toward the other architects. For every designer who has seen their work stolen, their contributions minimized, their careers threatened, this moment belongs to you as well. Your creativity wasn't diminished by what was done to you. It persists in everything you design, in every space you transform. My gaze shifted to Porter and Darian, to those who mistake power for talent, who build careers by taking rather than creating. Your time is ending, not just in architecture, but in every field where creativity is currency. I looked back at the audience. This award represents more than a single design. It represents a commitment, my commitment, to creating spaces where healing happens, where light reaches dark corners, where structures protect rather than threaten those inside them. I raised the award slightly. I accept this not just for myself, but for everyone working to build a more honest profession. Thank you. The applause began slowly, then built to a sustained ovation. As I returned to my seat, I caught Imogen's eye. She nodded once, a gesture that contained both approval and something more profound, the consignation of a battle well fought. After the ceremony, journalists swarmed, their questions overlapping. How does it feel to finally receive recognition? What will happen to the hospital project now? Did you know about the structural safety issues? I answered each question calmly, focusing on the future rather than recriminations. As the crowd thinned, Anton approached again, this time with June and Imogen. The developers who received your stolen designs have asked to meet with you, June said. They're interested in commissioning original work, with proper credit and compensation. I raised an eyebrow. Are they afraid of being implicated? Probably, Imogen admitted. But it's also an opportunity to establish new standards for how architectural work is commissioned and credited. We've prepared contracts that could serve as industry templates, Anton added. Complete transparency in design origin, clear attribution requirements, enhanced compensation structures for innovative concepts. I considered this as we walked toward the exit. Porter and Darian had already been escorted out, back to detention while awaiting trial for charges far more serious than I'd initially imagined. There's something else you should know, Imogen said quietly. The investigation revealed that Porter's firm wasn't the only one engaged in these practices. 3 other major firms have been implicated, with patterns dating back decades. My stomach tightened. How widespread is this? Widespread enough that the licensing board is creating a special task force, June replied. They've asked if you'd be willing to serve as a consultant. We paused at the entrance, where photographers waited to capture departing attendees. Through the glass doors, I could see city lights reflecting off the river beyond, a tapestry of illumination against darkness. What you started isn't just about your designs anymore, Imogen said. It's about restructuring how creativity is protected in an entire industry. I thought about the younger architects who would come after me, those with revolutionary visions and unconventional approaches. How many might have been silenced before they could transform our built environment? How many innovations lost because their creators were pushed out or appropriated? I'll help, I said finally, but on one condition, that we focus not just on punishment, but on prevention, on creating systems where this can't happen again. June smiled. That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. 1 year later, I stood at the entrance to the newly completed children's hospital, my design fully realized, with gardens growing through structural elements and light channels that followed healing rhythms. Patients and their families had already begun moving in, their faces showing the wonder I'd hoped to create. Porter and Darian were serving prison sentences, not just for design theft, but for fraud, blackmail, and criminal negligence related to the construction safety violations. The other architects whose work they'd stolen had received settlements and, more importantly, public recognition of their contributions. The Architectural Justice Project had expanded to 5 cities, with programs specifically supporting young designers from underrepresented backgrounds. The security system we'd developed to catch Porter and Darian had evolved into standard industry practice, protecting digital designs from unauthorized use. As I walked through the central atrium, a soaring space where trees grew toward the glass ceiling, I noticed a young woman sketching on a tablet. Her designs showed curved structures unlike anything in conventional architecture. "That's an interesting approach," I said, pausing beside her. She looked up, recognition dawning. "You're Nira Kwan. Your work is why I wanted to become an architect." "What are you designing?" I asked. "It's probably too experimental," she said, hesitating before turning the tablet toward me. "Floating structures that respond to weather patterns. My professors say it's impractical." I studied her design, bold, unconventional, brilliant in its conceptual approach. "There was a time when gardens growing through buildings seemed impractical too," I told her. "The Architectural Justice Project has an internship program for innovative thinkers. You should apply." Her face brightened. "Really? You think my ideas have potential?" "I know they do," I said. "And more importantly, I know they'll remain yours." I continued my tour of the hospital, watching how patients interacted with the spaces I'd designed. A young boy in a wheelchair navigated easily along curved pathways. A teenage girl sat in a garden nook, sunlight falling across her book through precisely angled light channels. A doctor conferred with parents in a consultation space designed to feel protective rather than clinical. This was the true victory, not the award on my office shelf or even the downfall of those who had wronged me, but the creation of spaces that changed how people experienced their most vulnerable moments. My phone buzzed with a message from Imogen. "Board meeting in an hour. The new ethics standards are ready for final review." I texted back confirmation, then paused for one last look at the central atrium. From this vantage point, I could see how all the elements worked together: light, structure, nature, and human movement in perfect harmony. Porter had once told me my designs were too specialized for commercial success. Darian had dismissed them as experiments rather than practical architecture. They had tried to steal what they couldn't create themselves, to claim vision they didn't possess. But vision, once released into the world, can't truly be contained or controlled. It spreads, influences, transforms. What they had tried to take from me had only grown stronger, reaching beyond a single building or award to change an entire profession. I smiled at the thought as I walked toward the exit, already planning my next design. If you've ever had your work stolen or been pushed aside while others took credit for your ideas, I hope this story resonated with you. Sometimes justice takes time, but truth eventually finds its way to the surface. Drop a comment about your own experiences with workplace justice. Hit subscribe for more stories about women who refuse to be silenced, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their creativity matters and deserves protection. Remember, your vision is yours alone, and no one can truly take what makes you exceptional.